Hey everyone, welcome back to How to Become an Animator, the series where I document my journey of becoming an animator and sharing with you the things I learned along the way. Today I've got 9 tips and 1 bonus tip for shooting your own video reference for body mechanics shots. So this can apply to whether you're shooting your own reference, having a friend get it for you, or if you're just looking online because maybe you can't shoot the reference for whatever it is you're trying to come up with. Now, you should have already figured out what's the general action that you're doing at this point, and this is for going out with a camera, with your phone, whatever you've got, to go capture that, bring it back to your software. I'm going to start off with some basic stuff and get more advanced as we go, so stick around to the end. Tip 1's an easy one. Make sure that when you record your video reference, you try to keep the same angle as what you're going to be animating to. So if you are going to be animating something where you're about eye level to the character, don't put your camera on the ground and record up at yourself because you don't have a tripod. Try to find something to place it on or get someone to hold it so that it's approximately the same height and same angle, same direction as what you're going to have in your shot. Tip number 2 is about capturing different perspectives or different views of the same action in your reference so that in your software, if you're using Maya, you can bring in multiple angles and you can see all the different aspects and angles and sides of the action. This is really helpful if you have multiple cameras or multiple people with their phones all capturing the same thing in case you do it differently on different takes, but we'll get into that in another tip. So here's an example. If you were to do a shot where you've got one guy running from 2 other people, and each one of them has to jump over a wall or a block or whatever it is. Let's say the first guy is a trained professional, he does parkour, he's gonna zip right over the block. The second guy is athletic. He's not gonna do a parkour vault because he doesn't know how to do it, but he's gonna get over the obstacle with no problem. The third guy, he's never done it before, he's not so trained, and so he's kinda gonna crash and burn. So what I did was capture each take from a different angle. So here you can see the first guy, trained professional, jumps right over the block, no problem. So I got this from a 3/4 view. Then I went and did the same thing from a front view. That way you can see straight on what it would look like in an orthographic window. And then to finish it off, I came over to the side and made sure to get that. This is extremely helpful if you have someone to help you film, but if you just had a tripod, you'd be able to accomplish the same effect. Now for the second clip. This guy is also athletic. He's not able to do the same vault, but he just zips right over from a 3/4 view, again. Now this one, I actually went both directions so you could get the opposite sides of the 3/4 view. I didn't feel it was necessary for the first vault because the first one was very symmetrical. You can see from the front or the 3/4 view that it's really the same thing on both sides with a little asymmetry. The second vault, however, is not nearly as symmetrical. So I made sure to get a 3/4 view from the front and the back just by changing my direction. I have a front view here and a side view over here. Now for this last one, I have a guy who's not nearly as athletic. Now I was only able to capture a 3/4 view of this one. I couldn't do a front or a side because I could never replicate the thing I had done before. It would have been really good to have multiple cameras at this so that I would have captured everything from all those angles, but I only had my phone with me, so I wasn't able to get those views. And this leads into tip number 3. Make sure that if you're going to only have one camera and one view, don't get an orthographic view. Don't get just a front or just a side, for the most part, depending on the action. Usually you want to aim for some kind of a 3/4 view, something from an angle so that you can see the front and the side of your character. Because if you only have the front or the side, you're going to lose a lot of the depth. You're not going to be able to tell where do the hips go, what's the rotation look like, because it's kind of flat. You need that dimension to make those discoveries. Tip number 4 is fairly straightforward as well. You don't want your camera moving around your object. If your shot calls for the camera to have a slight movement, and if someone who's doing the reference, you have to keep them in the frame, so you have to move your phone or your camera, that's fine. But you don't want to be doing a lot of camera work in your reference. You want to be pretty much locked down because the person in the reference is going to be moving around and doing all kinds of stuff, and then if the camera's moving too, it's hard to tell what's moving, what isn't, and there are certain frames where things just don't move, and you're going to lose that if your camera's moving. Just put it on a tripod, have someone stay still, shift a little bit if you need to get something in the frame, but try to stay pretty locked off. Number 5 is about using mirrors. So if you've only got one camera and you don't have that much space to work with, if you can prop a mirror against a wall and stand in a place where the camera's seeing you at whatever angle you need, but if you can also see your reflection in the mirror, you're going to end up, if you're at the right angle, getting the side view to whatever you're looking at, which is pretty much all you're going to need because anything that you don't see from the camera view, you're going to see it from that mirror view. So that can be an extremely useful way to capture another angle with only one camera. Now number 6 is continuity. You have to keep in mind what directions things are happening on. So if you're doing a fight scene and you've got someone throw a right hook, you have to make sure that every time, and if you do different angles of the same take, you've got to make sure it's always the right arm. That's pretty easy to remember But if you switch to something like parkour and you've got people jumping off stuff, a lot of it's just, instinct. You land with whatever foot is most comfortable for your body at that moment. So you need to review the footage after every take. Doing that for these clips, on the main one I wanted to use, see how my right foot touches down first? Well, I did it again and again from different angles, and I kept hitting with my left foot. That's gonna totally ruin all the mechanics and using all the different angles. So I had to do it again and again until I made sure to land with the right foot, always the right foot. Same foot as before, that way all the hips and the shoulder rotations still make sense from every angle. Otherwise, it's a similar thing and you have to either mirror the image or do weird stuff, otherwise you're gonna run into issues. Number 7 is a 2-part tip. It's about intention and acting. This is a body mechanics shot, so there's probably not a whole lot of acting going on, but it's important to remember that whatever the case of what this character is doing, in your shot or in my examples, you've got people running. In my case, I decided, okay, these guys are chasing that dude. You wanna remember, they're not just jumping over a block. You have to make sure not to just move the characters and have them do what you want them to do. You have to let them live their lives. Like, these have to be real, breathing, thinking, feeling characters. So you need to allow them to have a thought process and show that. You have to keep in mind, they're after somebody. They're looking straight ahead. They're looking off into the distance. They're focused on that point. They'll look down at the block to make sure they don't hurt themselves, but they are focused singularly on whatever they're doing. A good example of this one is if you're gonna jump off of something. So here, somebody asked me for Spider-Man reference. I perched on top of this pole and I jumped off. Now, what you'll notice is, the first time I did it, I'm not very convincing. I look immediately down. I'm focused completely on the landing, not on the actual jump, and the jump's the part that's gonna be most helpful. My friend there with me at the time had to remind me, I'm Spider-Man. I am going somewhere. I am jumping off this building, off this rail, off this pole, whatever it is. I am jumping off something, and I am gonna swing and go to my next destination. So, I can't worry about the landing. There is no ground. I'm Spider-Man. I'm not gonna worry about it, which is really hard to psych yourself into, but that's the intention. That's the only reason that shot's gonna be believable. If you use this first clip of reference, it's not gonna really look like Spider-Man. And in this clip, it's a lot more effective. I get all the way up, strike a great pose. This is much more useful because I remembered the intention of the shot. There's actual acting behind the mechanics. It's not just emotion. There's something happening in the character's head of why they're doing this. Tip number 8 is extremely important whether you're doing acting reference or body mechanics reference. In this case, I'll stick with the Spider-Man example. I needed to jump off this thing, and I was having a hard time putting myself in the mindset of I'm actually going somewhere. I kept jumping off and just looking down immediately. So what I did is I picked a point and I said, all right, where am I going? I'm Spider-Man, where is my destination? Whether you're in an acting shot or a body mechanics shot, either way, remember that the character is doing something for a purpose. Either they're hitting somebody, or they're dancing for a crowd, or whatever the case may be. But if they're jumping off a pole and they're Spider-Man, they're not just jumping up to swing away. He's aiming for something. He has to make sure that he hits something with the web or he's gonna fall down. So, I had to decide in this moment, what am I looking at? What am I aiming for? And obviously I'm not Spider-Man, I don't have web shooters, but I had to just try to aim for it as if I did. So I picked a rafter on the roof. You could use a lamp, something on the ceiling in this case, or if you're doing something out and about, use a tripod, hang a ping pong ball from something, stick tape on a wall, use a chair, doesn't matter. Having that reference point gave me something to focus on and made sure that, okay, I'm Spider-Man, I have to aim at that thing and hit it, which helped with the intention and acting because it kept me in character to make sure I was aiming for that thing, but also it helped me figure out the pose. I figured out where it would be good to the camera angle, because if I aim too far over here, it's too much of a side profile. Aim too much this way, and you've got this arm blocking the body, and you've got a weird silhouette. And so I made sure to kind of pick somewhere that was gonna be good for the camera, and then I just picked a point and said, okay, that's gonna help me act. Now number 9 is kind of a fun one, Post-it notes. What? Post-it notes? What is? Let me explain. If you ever have a hard time looking at your reference and figuring out, what are the hips doing? Where's the rotation? I can't. So what you can do is take brightly colored Post-it notes and just stick them to your body. They're not very adhesive on their own, so if you're doing something really subtle, maybe that's fine, but chances are you're gonna need some clear tape to stick them on and keep them there. But this is just going to help you track the motion and track the movements where you wouldn't really get to see it before. One last thing, you might also need to tuck in your shirt if you're tracking all the right points. As far as where to put the Post-its, you probably want one on each shoulder, one on the front, middle of your chest, one on the back, and then same thing for the hips. One on each side of your hips, one on the front, one on the back. Now those are the 9 tips, but I've got one extra thing. When you're recording, frame rate is a big question. Do you record in slow-mo? Do you not? Motion blur can really screw you up. So if you're recording in 24 frames a second, you might get a lot of blur in the motion. So if I were to take a clip of me waving, chances are there's a frame here where it's just totally blurred out. That motion blur might make it really hard to tell what's going on. To combat that, you either need to change some camera settings or you need to record in a higher frame rate. And you don't need a fancy camera to do this. Your phone's gonna have a 60 frames per second mode, chances are. Like I recorded all these clips on my phone at 240 frames per second. So if you have trouble with frame rate and motion blur, just record at a higher frame rate. That's it for this video. I'll probably do something similar for an acting reference video. That way we have one for body mechanics and then one more specific to actually acting with characters. And I've also got a bunch planned, actually. I've got like 50 something videos I brainstormed and figured out to do for you guys. So, if you don't want to miss all that great stuff coming soon, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be posting a bunch of things. Thanks for watching today's episode, and I'll see you next time. See ya.